Pleased to introduce our Strand 6 talk for day 3, and it's Natasha Sharp. Natasha has been working as an ELT professional for almost 15 years. Recently, she's been focusing on safeguarding children and adults. She has a master's in law in human rights law and is completing an MSc in international safeguarding. She currently works for British Council Thailand as the National Safeguarding Manager. During Natasha's talk, we recommend watching in speaker view, and if you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A box. Take it away and please share your screen, Natasha.
Hi everyone, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I'm not sure where everyone is. I'm currently in Bangkok, so it's evening for me. And fortunately, we've just had a big storm go over, so hopefully I shouldn't have any internet problems. Okay, is my video working now? Yes. I'm a teacher by background, but I also have a background in international human rights law, and I'm currently working on an international safeguarding master's as well. So I feel like I can bring a different perspective sometimes because I'm from a mixed background in terms of the things that I study and in terms of the work that I do, that I can give a different perspective and sometimes a more realistic perspective. I've heard some amazing things over the past 2 days. There's great initiatives out there, there's great ideas out there. And we all go away from conferences with these huge ideas of what we want to achieve and things we're going to implement. And today I'm just going to talk about some little things that we can do every day that will make such a difference in the lives of the children that we teach. So I hope the title of this got people's attention. I'm an English teacher, not a social worker. Well, for me, I am an English teacher and I am a social worker, but I do understand where people are coming from. What I'm just going to run through today in the next 20 or so minutes is things that I've heard from teachers. Going to look at the different types of adverse childhood experiences, what they mean for children, what they mean in terms of educational attainment, the long-lasting impact that these can have, and some of the little things that I really want someone to take away something that they can instantly put into a classroom first thing tomorrow morning. I don't think there's anything new or anything that we haven't been trying to tell teachers about before, but I'm trying to put it away together in a way that I found to be more impactful when I'm training teachers, and to provide some more context on the things that I do, and the way that I work and the way that I expect my teachers to work, that supports children's rights and supports child protection within our teaching centres. So on the screen now is a selection of statements that I've heard over the past 5 or 6 years from teachers when I've asked for their help and support in working with children or trying to make them aware of what children are going through or experiencing. Please feel free to use the chat to add in any statements that you've heard that shocked you, that made you think, oh, that's a bit not how I see being a teacher. There's a lot of people say, and I think my favorite one that comes up frequently is that I'm always looking for a way to justify bad behavior. I'm never looking for a way to justify bad behavior. I'm just asking people to look beyond what they're seeing is right in front of them. There is so much more going on in a child's mind than the behavior that we're seeing. My favorite one, another favorite one, is it's not part of my job description. As teachers, we all have a duty of care towards the people that we teach, whether they are children, whether they are adults, whether they are anyone, no matter their age, their race, their gender. It's not important. We have a duty of care. They are with us for a period of time. And during that time, it's our responsibility to make sure that we can ensure their well-being. Sometimes this can be a legal duty. So within the UK, there's a statutory duty for teachers to have their duty of care towards them. There's sometimes a duty of care that needs to be in place just because there are mandatory reporting systems for child protection. I think often you will find that it is part of the job description, and it may not be as apparent as you must look after all your students, but it may be there as in you need them to achieve certain results. You need them to participate in lessons, and you can't do any of that before you look after their well-being. There's a phrase out there at the moment, and I know that some people have hit on Maslow's hierarchies of needs. And as teachers, we're always taught about Bloom's taxonomy and the different higher order thinking skills, but you can't do any of that until you've got your basic safety in place and your Maslow's hierarchy of needs set there and in space. Beyond legal duties, beyond statutory duties, mandatory reporting, and job descriptions, surely as teachers, as educators, what our role in our heart of hearts is to educate. And that means that, for me anyway, and I'm sure many people here will agree, that we have a human and a moral and an ethical duty to make sure that the kids that we teach are okay. And as young learner teachers, we all know that we refer to them as our kids. They're not someone else's kids that we teach. We take them on as our own. And a good teacher who cares about well-being will always, always be a favourite amongst kids. Even those people that feel maybe there isn't a need to look after child well-being, and that's fine. The way that I've started to talk them round is that you can only have positive learning, you can only have successful educational outcomes if child well-being is in place. Without child well-being, without making sure that the children you teach are okay, they won't achieve anywhere as near their full potential if you're not looking after that. It's great. I'm trying to read through some of the comments that are coming through as well, and it seems that we've all come across people who have said sentences like these or statements like these, and you'd be surprising by the time I get to the end of this, things that we do already that we just need to build upon, and it's such a good thing. One thing we have to bear in mind is that whilst I work in safeguarding, I work within child protection, and child protection and safeguarding are about protecting children from abuse. And there's a very strict definition of what that includes. But I like to broaden it out and look at a concept called adverse childhood experiences. There are 3 types of adverse childhood experiences, and they fall within, the first 2 are very much within the safeguarding and child protection remit. And they are abuse, whether physical, emotional, or sexual abuse. There's also the second category of neglect, whether that's physical neglect or emotional, where children aren't given the love and the care that they need to develop. But within adverse childhood experiences, there is a separate section which covers things like household dysfunction. And household dysfunction covers mental illness for anyone that is within the home. So that could be parents, grandparents, the children themselves, an incarcerated relative, whether direct family or more extended family, that will have an impact on a child. The example I've taken here from NPR says mother treated violently. But we can also extend that further to include any form of domestic violence, whether it's elder abuse, whether it's child violence. And also, please do remember that men can be victims of domestic abuse as well. And that rate is slowly increasing. So it's important to remember not only to focus on the mother. Substance abuse, whether that's from the parents, whether it's from close family friends or the child themselves, it all contributes to household dysfunction. Here it says divorce, but I want to expand on that one as well. It can include separation, absent parents, looked after children who have been taken away from their families for their own safety. That is a household dysfunction, and also children that have been adopted. The evidence shows that most children will suffer 1 or 2 adverse childhood experiences. That once you start to get 3 or more adverse childhood experiences, you are 3 times more likely to have negative lifetime outcomes than someone who doesn't. And once you get to 5 adverse childhood experiences, that becomes even higher. And you're looking then at 6 to 7 times more likely to suffer negative outcomes. The reason I want to bring this up today is because we are currently in the middle of a pandemic. And that means that every single child under the age of 18 will start, no matter what is happening in their lives, COVID-19 has been classified as an adverse childhood experience. So every child in the world is already starting with a count of 1. Most of us will have started when we were born at a count of 0. If you add on to that conflict within countries, if you're looking at Afghanistan, that adds another. So those children are now starting with a count of 2. If we're looking at gender rights, sexual orientation and gender identity rights, we're bringing it in, and that count just can go up so quickly. And I think teachers need to be aware of all of this, that we're not just looking at the abuse side of things. We need to be aware of a much wider remit of what children are experiencing and how it will impact them in the future. I apologise for all of the examples that I haven't mentioned, and thank you so much for adding them into the chat for me. There are so many things that fall under these 3 categories. The approach that I've been taking with all of my teachers is to expand upon this and look beyond the now and look into children's futures. This graphic from the CDC in America is one of my favorite because it breaks down the types of things that we consider to be negative lifetime outcomes. And we've just looked at the type of ACEs that can happen, and these are the outcomes that can be there. We have to have a deeper understanding that we only see children for a very short period of their life, of their day, but actually the impact we can have can be lifelong. And by introducing teachers as a positive factor, as a buffer to ACEs, to add more of the positive and move away from the negative, we can actually start to reverse the impact of ACEs, and we can prevent some of these longer term impacts from happening. In terms of injury, we can include in here, it's very physical here and mental health as well, but we've also got the infectious diseases included, and chronic diseases. One of the links that is coming through strongly in the research at the moment is that children with high numbers of ACEs are more likely to suffer from chronic diseases such as heart attacks, diabetes, fatty liver. And these are medical conditions that could be avoided by people being involved, by people stepping in at an earlier stage and making sure that kids are okay. The final one is the one that I often ask teachers to focus on, which is opportunities. And here it looks at occupation, at income, at education, but we can extend this out. The higher the number of ACEs, the more likely we are to have students with poor attendance as a key indicator that something's wrong, that these students will have lower grades, they will be poorly engaged in education, whether it's with us as language teachers, whether it's at their regular school, whether it's at the soccer coaching that they go to after school, their engagement becomes much lower. This in turn all leads to lower academic achievement, and it gives them a lack of engagement with responsible adults. Us as teachers are responsible adults. We are grown-ups. I know some of us don't always feel that we are the proper grown-up. And I know I certainly feel that sometimes when people come to me to ask for help and support, but we are the grown-ups, we are the responsible people in their lives, and we should be taking on that responsibility. And the problem, once there are this low academic achievement, that it leads to lifelong issues such as reduced employment opportunities. If you don't have the grades, you can't move on to the next phase in life. So that's where this real solid link between making sure kids are okay and their well-being and child protection and children's rights fits directly in with teaching, because we need to support them to achieve these educational outcomes that will potentially decide the direction they take later on in life. With reduced employment opportunities, we're looking at poverty, substance abuse, incarceration, and more worryingly, we actually are seeing higher and higher rates of intergenerational violence and outcomes. So that repetition, that cycle keeps repeating itself until someone steps in and helps and tries to find a way out. There is a direct correlation between our role as teachers and preventing the negative outcomes that will come later on in life. So I've given you a really brief overview of adverse childhood experiences, what they include, what they cover, what they can result in. I think something that I know in conferences I've been to before, in sessions that I've been in before, is the takeaways. So I'm going to give you a whole list of takeaways, and I like to call them the little things. The little things are classroom techniques. They are questions. They are ways of thinking that don't need months and months and months of research for someone to take on. They don't need action research. They just need you to change the way you think and the way you look at things in your classroom. Some of them are very similar, some of them are quite different, but I'm going to go through some that I want to pick up on in more detail. And I'm hoping none of this is new information. If it is, please look into it further. But these are teaching techniques that I know as a TILEC tutor, I teach and I go through with course participants regularly. As an academic manager, I go through some of these with teachers. And as a safeguarding manager, they are questions that I pose to teachers regularly. I'm going to take the first two together, which is your attitude as a teacher and the fact that children are mirrors. I'm certainly not suggesting that you take mirrors into classrooms, but do remember, however you run the class, however you manage the class, however you feel, the language you use, the way that you talk about things, that will be reflected back to you by the students in your class. And I'm not saying everyone needs to go out and be completely open and honest, but make sure you are talking about emotions in class. Make sure you are showing emotional regulation make sure that your attitude is friendly and welcoming and that you are creating a safe space. Classrooms are one of the most important safe spaces a child can have, whether that's online or offline. It's so important, and our attitude determines whether or not a child will feel safe. I have worked with a lot of teachers about classroom management, and it's one of my key areas that I like to work on, is having positive behaviour management. Can we award points rather than taking points away? Can we look at rephrasing the way that we use our instructions in class, in the way that we have our class rules? I see a lot of teachers routinely, and their classroom rules are all based in negative language, negative phrasing, and it's so simple. And one of the techniques that I work through with teachers is asking them to rephrase. And how can you take that from a negative to a positive? And it's very simple things like, instead of saying to someone, don't speak your language, we change it to, please can you speak English for this activity? Instead of, don't run in the classroom, please be careful in the classroom. It's such a simple thing, and it's so small, but the impact suddenly changes the atmosphere in a classroom to one of regulation and strong discipline, to one of fairness and equality and consideration, and educating children on ways of behaviour rather than punishing them for not knowing the difference. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm a really strict teacher when I teach, but I do it in a positive and reinforcing way. I very much would like to emphasize that there are no bad kids, and don't let any teacher tell you there are. There are kids that get on your nerves. There are kids that do stupid things. And trust me, I've seen some of them. I've had to talk to children about bringing knives to school. I've had to talk to students about appropriate sexual behaviour, you know, but there's always been a reason behind it. There are no bad kids. We just need to work out to find out what's going on so that we can help them. I'm not going to go through all of these, and I'm not going to go through them all in order. I don't have time, but please do make sure that within your school, within your country, within your area, that you know how to report when there is a problem. And there are different reporting systems. So where I work, people will report to me, or they will report to their line manager, and it's then my job to investigate what's going on and to provide support and specialist advice. And I know not everyone has that system in place, but there are people out there to get help from. And it may not be a formal route. It may be an informal route. It could be talking to your peers. It could be working within your communities. It could be national helplines or child lines. And then that's just know how to get help for yourself as well. And I think that's really important. There's been a lot of talks during this conference about social and emotional learning. And I think it's one of the most important things we can do is making sure that we look at using opportunities for us to voice our skills and for us to encourage students to find it normal, to empower them and to equip them with ways to talk about their emotions, their feelings, their opinions, their beliefs. There's space for it in everything we do. And it's simple questions. How do you feel about that? What would you do if that happened? Why would someone be upset by that? What would you do differently? And they're very simple questions, and they're a bank of questions that you can have on hand for every lesson to go beyond that initial, this is language, because they need the language to be able to do that social and emotional learning. So we're still teaching, we're just teaching in a slightly different way. One of the things that I would beg everyone to do, and because we're all here, I know it's something that we're all going to do, is that we ourselves continue to learn, that we are linked into what is happening in the world, what is happening in the lives of children. I recently had a request for someone to run a TikTok channel, and I've asked them to put it on hold because I know at the moment there are currently legal cases up against TikTok over child data. And I only know that because I keep myself aware and abreast of what's going on in the world in terms of child development, in terms of children's rights, what children are experiencing and how they're experiencing it. I think it's something that we ourselves need to know, because if we don't know and we don't understand, we can't support. And I'm not saying go and learn anything and everything, but we do need to be able to have some idea of what's going on in children's minds. The last one I want to pick up on, which is so important, is teacher self-care. You cannot look after children. You cannot ensure their well-being if your well-being is not in place. This is something I've learned the hard way, and I've poured my everything into children before, to the extent that I've then had to back off and not be able to provide as much support. Please, please make sure that you are looking after yourselves, that you are taking breaks, that you are eating well, that you are looking after yourself so that you can look after the children that you're responsible for. That's everything from me. I've got, I think, a couple of minutes if there are any questions or anything that people would like clarification on.
Natasha, hi, thank you very much. That was really good. I can see from the comments about that, you know, you've really touched a nerve with lots and lots of people and lots of very supportive comments. So thanks very much for your presentation. I think the idea
so much
is, you know, positive learning comes from child well-being, and you know, it's an absolute virtuous circle, isn't it? The more we kind of help and support the child, the more feedback and more kind of response we get from as teachers as well. So I think that's really good. Yeah. Okay, Natasha, would you mind stopping sharing your screen, please?
I will do that, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to have a 5-minute break now. So if you'd like to join us then, and then we'll have our next presentation.